The crystal chandeliers shimmered like galaxies suspended from the ceiling, scattering light across champagne glasses and glittering gowns. Inside the grand ballroom of Lagos's most exclusive five-star hotel, opulence reigned supreme. White roses lined every table, silver candles flickered with quiet grace, and the hum of soft waltz music floated through the air like a secret promise. Jasmine Ferguson sat alone at a corner table, doing her best to appear composed while her palms grew damp with nerves. Her midnight blue dress framed her tall, elegant figure, but the high heels she wore made her steps earlier on the red carpet feel more like survival than style. She didn't know anyone here apart from the bride, her best friend, now glowing under a storm of camera flashes and champagne toasts. "Alone, are you?" came a woman's voice from the next table, lilting and amused. Jasmine turned slightly, forcing a polite smile. "Just taking in the view," she replied evenly. Still, she could feel the woman's gaze sweeping over her, judgment hidden behind a faint smile. It wasn't the first time she'd felt it. These high society events were always full of whispers. She came alone. No date, no ring, out of place. Jasmine raised her glass and took a slow sip, trying to drown the sting of their scrutiny in the warmth of good wine. Usually she didn't care about people's opinions, but tonight, under a ceiling full of glitter and expectation, her solitude felt sharper, like being the only still note in a room of endless music. She glanced at her watch. Only 8 o'clock, too early to leave without appearing rude. Just as she was considering an escape toward the terrace, a shadow fell across her table. A tall man in a tailored black suit moved with quiet authority, claiming the empty seat beside her without so much as a hesitation. His silver silk tie caught the light as he leaned in slightly, his features strong and deliberate. Broad shoulders, clean-cut jaw, and eyes the color of storm clouds. Jasmine blinked, startled. Before she could speak, his deep, steady voice brushed her ear. "Pretend you're with me." Her heart lurched. "Excuse me?" she whispered back, eyes narrowing. He didn't look at her. His gaze remained fixed on a group of gossiping guests a few tables away. "They're watching you," he murmured. "And me. Let's make it easier for both of us. Pretend we came together." Jasmine almost laughed, half out of disbelief, half out of nerves. "You think I'll play the girlfriend of a complete stranger?" Now, his expression calm yet commanding. His gray eyes caught hers, and for a moment, she forgot to breathe. The faintest trace of sandalwood lingered around him, rich, masculine, refined. "Trust me," he said quietly. "You'll avoid unnecessary gossip, and I'll avoid a meaningless setup. We both win." She hesitated. He wasn't wrong. The judgmental glances had already shifted into curious ones. The single woman in the corner had suddenly become the mysterious date of the city's most talked-about guest. "Fine," she thought, taking another sip of wine. "How far are you planning to take this little act?" He smiled faintly, one brow arching. "As far as you let me." Then, without warning, he rested his arm casually across the back of her chair, a gesture so effortlessly intimate it drew quiet murmurs around the table. Jasmine's spine stiffened. "Danger," her mind whispered. "This man knows exactly what he's doing." "What's your name?" she asked, her voice lower now, laced with suspicion. "Desmond Frederick," he replied simply. Her stomach flipped. The Desmond Frederick? The youngest billionaire in Lagos' financial world? The man whose mergers were on every business page? She blinked, trying to mask her shock. "Of all people," she muttered. He poured more wine into her glass, his movements graceful and assured. "Relax, Miss Ferguson," he said softly. Her pulse skipped. "You know me?" "I remember faces," he said, his tone unreadable. "And yours is hard to forget." Jasmine looked away quickly, her heart thudding in her chest. This was absurd. She had come here to support her friend, not to end up in some public performance beside Lagos's most enigmatic CEO. Yet as the evening flowed, Desmond played the role to perfection. When curious guests approached, he introduced her smoothly. "Jasmine Ferguson, someone very special to me." His words were delivered with calm conviction, though the faint curve of his lips betrayed a trace of amusement. Jasmine played along, matching his charm with practiced poise, when one of the bride's cousins leaned in, gushing, "You two make such a lovely couple." Jasmine nearly choked on her drink. Lovely couple? She was a journalist who barely managed to sleep 6 hours a night, sitting beside a man who probably had servants ironing his cufflinks. Still, beneath the chandeliers and murmured music, the act began to feel strangely natural. Desmond's composure was unwavering. He laughed quietly at her sarcasm, rescued her from awkward conversations, and even whispered ridiculous one-liners to make her smile. "You're quite the actor," she murmured when they slipped away to the dessert table. He glanced at her, his lips curving in that infuriating half-smile. "Who said I was acting?" Her breath caught. The way he said it, low, deliberate, made something flutter deep in her chest. The night carried on, and they moved together as if they'd rehearsed the part. Their shoulders brushed when they leaned closer to talk. Their laughter came easier than either expected. Under the golden lights, the line between pretense and possibility blurred. By the time the band began playing its final waltz, Jasmine found herself smiling, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. When Desmond stood to leave, he extended a hand to her. "You've survived the night," he said, that faint spark still in his eyes. She raised a brow. "Barely." He smirked. "Then I'll take that as a win." She slipped her hand into his for a polite shake, but the warmth of his touch lingered longer than it should have. As he turned to go, she found herself watching him disappear into the crowd of glitter and music, wondering how one whispered sentence, "Pretend you're with me," had somehow changed the course of her night. Outside, fireworks burst over the lagoon, lighting up the Lagos sky. Jasmine stood at the window, her reflection shimmering against the glass. "It's just pretend," she whispered to herself, trying to steady the rhythm of her pulse. But deep down, she knew, whatever this was, it had already begun. 3 days had passed since the wedding, yet Jasmine Ferguson still couldn't erase that night from her mind. Every detail returned uninvited: the hum of the violins, the laughter of strangers, and Desmond Frederick's quiet voice brushing her ear like an unspoken dare. She told herself it was nothing, a strange, fleeting encounter. Pretend and forget. But forgetting was harder than she expected. The newsroom of the Financial Chronicle buzzed with its usual chaos: reporters shouting across desks, printers spitting out pages, phones ringing with leads that always seemed urgent. Jasmine sat at her desk, tapping at her keyboard, trying to drown her thoughts in spreadsheets and reports. Then she heard it, the unmistakable purr of an engine outside. A sleek black Bentley glided to a stop at the curb, drawing stares even from the street vendors nearby. The tinted window lowered, and that same cool, commanding voice called out, "Miss Ferguson." Her fingers froze above the keyboard. When she turned, Desmond Frederick was leaning slightly out of the window, calm and composed as if waiting for a meeting he'd already scheduled. "You've got to be kidding," she muttered, standing abruptly. Colleagues peeked curiously as she hurried outside. He gestured toward the passenger door. "If you're not busy, I need 5 minutes." Jasmine crossed her arms. "This feels less like a request and more like a summons." He didn't deny it. "Then consider it that." She sighed, knowing resistance was futile. Against her better judgment, she opened the door and slipped into the car. Inside smelled faintly of leather and something crisp, like money and restraint. She sank into the seat, her worn heels suddenly feeling wildly out of place against the Bentley's spotless flooring. He didn't waste time. "Do you remember what I said at the wedding?" "How could I forget?" she replied dryly. "I spent half the night pretending to be your girlfriend, while everyone whispered about our romance. I deserve an Oscar." The corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Then you'll understand why I'm here." "Oh no," Jasmine said immediately, holding up a hand. "If you're about to ask for a sequel to that performance, I'm declining in advance." "I'm not asking," Desmond said evenly. "I'm offering." She blinked. "Offering what exactly?" He turned slightly toward her, the Lagos sunlight cutting sharp lines across his face. Both the media and my shareholders are getting restless. They think I'm too cold, too private. Rumors are spreading that I'm impossible to work with, incapable of relationships, even abnormal. Jasmine arched a brow. So you need a girlfriend to fix your stock value? If the public sees stability, the company sees confidence, he said, voice steady. It's simple optics. You'd be helping me and yourself. She gave a soft, incredulous laugh. Helping myself? How exactly? He leaned back, his expression unreadable. You'd be seen, not just as a journalist, but as someone who belongs in the same rooms as the people you write about. Every door in Lagos' corporate world would open for you. Jasmine hesitated, her pulse quickening. He wasn't wrong. Her newsroom had been trying for months to dig in rumors about offshore accounts and illegal fund transfers, all buried deep within the walls of companies like his. This could be her way in. Still, she folded her arms and raised her chin. Let me guess. You expect me to smile, wave, and wear designer dresses while you work your billionaire magic? Desmond's lips curved faintly. You make it sound shallow. Isn't it? She challenged. He met her gaze. Not if it serves a purpose. She held his stare for a long moment, searching for any sign of arrogance. Instead, she saw calm confidence and something deeper, something almost human flickering beneath that control. Finally, she exhaled. All right, but if I agree, I set my own terms. He nodded once. Fair. One, she said, counting on her fingers. I walk away whenever I want. No explanations needed. Understood. Two, if anyone asks, I'm still the independent woman who pays her own rent. I'd expect nothing less. And three, she said, leaning slightly closer, if I end up on the front page of a gossip blog, you owe me front row tickets to an apology. That earned the faintest chuckle from him, quiet, unexpected, almost warm. Deal, he said. Jasmine studied him for a moment, trying to decide if he was genuinely amused or just amused by her. Probably both. She reached out a hand. Temporary arrangement, she said. He took it, his grip firm, steady, warm, the kind of handshake that said he was used to winning deals. A temporary illusion, he corrected softly. But play it well, Miss Ferguson, and we both walk away satisfied. Play it well? She echoed, her voice laced with irony. You make it sound like theater. It is, he replied, eyes glinting. And you're a better actress than you think. Jasmine smirked. You're a dangerous man, Desmond Frederick. Only when necessary. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It hummed with quiet tension, a mix of challenge and curiosity neither could name. As the car rolled forward, she glanced out the window at the skyline of Victoria Island, glittering towers rising like glass crowns. Somewhere in those offices lay the secret she'd been chasing for months, and now, sitting beside Desmond, she realized she might finally have access to the truth. You're serious about this, she said softly, turning back to him. I don't waste time on anything I'm not serious about. So what happens if people actually believe us? He tilted his head. Then we both have to keep believing it too. That line lingered in the air, heavier than she expected. She turned away quickly, hiding the small, traitorous smile threatening to form. When the car finally stopped in front of her building, Desmond didn't move to get out. He simply said, I'll have someone send you the details for Friday night's event. Dress code's formal. You'll manage. Confident, aren't you? She teased. Always. She opened the door, stepping out into the afternoon heat. Before she could close it, his voice stopped her. Jasmine. She turned. His eyes held hers cool, unyielding, but edged with something she couldn't quite name. Just remember, he said quietly, pretending is only dangerous when one of us forgets it's pretend. Her heart skipped. Then let's both remember, she replied. The door shut, and the Bentley pulled away, its glossy black reflection gliding down the street until it disappeared. Jasmine stood there for a long moment, the Lagos wind tugging at her hair, her mind whirling between logic and something dangerously close to excitement. Newell, She just agreed to become the fake girlfriend of the most enigmatic man in the city for reasons that had nothing to do with love. Or so she told herself. The flash of cameras lit up the marble staircase as Desmond Frederick stepped out of the Bentley, offering his hand to Jasmine Ferguson. Her heart raced, not because of the paparazzi, but because of how naturally he did it, like they'd been together for years. "Smile," he murmured under his breath. "I am smiling," she whispered back, lips barely moving. "Then maybe smile like you mean it." She rolled her eyes but obeyed. Beneath the glow of the chandeliers, their entrance was nothing short of breathtaking. At Lagos's most anticipated charity gala, the new power couple had arrived. Inside the ballroom, everything shimmered. Crystal walls, glass sculptures, and gowns that sparkled like ocean light. A live orchestra played soft jazz, and conversations buzzed around them like bees drawn to champagne. Desmond looked composed, even serene, as if the entire room existed merely to orbit him. Jasmine, however, felt every stare. The women's curious glances, the men's discreet nods. It was like walking through a field of spotlights. But she straightened her shoulders and remembered her silent mantra: play the part, collect the clues. "Don't worry," Desmond said softly, noticing her unease. "They'll get used to you soon." She raised a brow. "Used to me pretending, you mean?" His lips curved faintly. "You're better at this than you think." He wasn't wrong. As the evening progressed, Jasmine moved through the room like she belonged there. She laughed at the right jokes, smiled at the right people, and stood beside Desmond as though she'd been born into that world of whispered deals and glass perfection. And all the while, her mind worked like a silent machine, listening, observing, memorizing. When Desmond introduced her to a group of businessmen, she caught fragments of conversation that made her pulse quicken. Words like subsidiaries, overseas transfers, and anonymous investors. Her journalist instincts pricked up like antennae. A few moments later, when Desmond was called away by an investor, Jasmine drifted toward a nearby display of donated art. She admired a painting of Lagos Lagoon at dusk, brilliant strokes of gold and blue dancing across the canvas. Two men stood near her, whispering. "Still waiting on confirmation from the Cayman accounts," one said. "If the transfer delays again, we'll have to use BLC Holdings." BLC Holdings. The name hit her like a spark to dry tinder. That same company had been flagged in her newsroom's confidential reports. A suspected shell organization linked to illegal funds. She turned her head slightly, pretending to sip champagne, and caught the rest of their exchange. "Mr. Frederick doesn't like loose ends," the second man muttered. Her chest tightened. Before she could process the implication, Desmond's low voice cut through the music behind her. "Enjoying the art, Miss Ferguson?" She nearly jumped. "You move too quietly." "It's called grace," he teased. She smiled faintly, forcing calm. "I was just admiring the painting. The colors feel alive." Desmond's gaze softened. "Blue was my mother's favorite color," he said quietly. She used to say it reminded her of peace, of the sea she missed from her childhood. It was the first personal thing he had ever shared with her. Jasmine turned to look at him, surprised by the shift in his tone. "You talk about her like she's still around," she said softly. "She's not," he replied, eyes fixed on the painting. "She died when I was 10, but I still hear her sometimes, especially when I stand near the water." The calm authority he usually wore like armor seemed to crack, revealing something fragile beneath. "I'm sorry," Jasmine said sincerely. He nodded once, then met her eyes. "Don't be." Her lessons stayed. "She taught me that vulnerability can destroy a man. I never forgot that." His words lingered between them like smoke. For the first time, Jasmine saw not the ruthless CEO, but a man carved by loneliness. Someone who'd built walls not from pride, but from survival. The orchestra shifted into a slower melody. Desmond extended his hand toward her. "Dance with me." She hesitated. "Is that part of the act?" He smiled faintly. "Does it matter?" Her pulse betrayed her before her thoughts could protest. "Fine," she murmured, placing her hand in his. The crowd parted slightly as he led her onto the floor. Under the soft gold lighting, they moved in rhythm, his hand at her waist, her fingers resting lightly on his shoulder. Jasmine's body obeyed the music, but her mind spun. She'd come to observe, to collect information, but now she was caught in something deeper, something dangerously human. "Relax," Desmond whispered. "You're thinking too much." "I always think too much." He chuckled under his breath. "That's your problem. You analyze every heartbeat. And you don't?" "Not anymore," he said, eyes fixed on hers. "I stopped the day I realized emotions can't be negotiated." His words unsettled her in ways she couldn't explain. The song ended, but neither of them moved away immediately. For a brief, breathless moment, their eyes locked, and the whole room faded into soft blur. Then Desmond released her hand. "Come on," he said quietly. "You need air." They stepped out onto the terrace where the city skyline glittered like spilled diamonds. The night air was cool, scented with sea breeze and possibility. Jasmine leaned against the railing, gazing at the lagoon below. "So this is your world," she murmured. "Endless parties and power games." He stood beside her, his expression unreadable. "You think that's all it is? You tell me." He glanced at her, then back at the water. "It's quieter than it looks. You just have to know where to listen." His voice was lower now, almost thoughtful, and Jasmine, despite herself, felt drawn to that rare softness in him. But as she turned slightly, her phone buzzed in her clutch. A message from her editor flashed across the screen. "Follow the money. Cayman accounts start with BLC Holdings." Her stomach dropped. Desmond noticed her expression. "Bad news?" She forced a smile, slipping her phone away. "Just work. It never stops." He studied her face, as if searching for what she wasn't saying. "Be careful not to lose yourself in it," he said quietly. "Some things are more valuable than ambition." His gaze held hers, steady, unguarded. For a heartbeat, she wondered if he meant her job or him. She tore her eyes away, hiding the tremor in her voice. "Ambition keeps me alive, Desmond." He smiled faintly. "So does curiosity, and both can be dangerous." When they returned inside, the night continued in a blur of laughter, toasts, and discreet whispers. But Jasmine's mind was no longer in the ballroom. Behind every smile, every sip of champagne, every accidental brush of his hand against hers, her thoughts circled that single name, BLC Holdings. The evening ended with applause for the donors. As Desmond guided her to the car, his hand brushed hers again, his touch deliberate, protective. "Thank you for tonight," he said as they slid into the Bentley. "You made it look real." She glanced at him. "Isn't that the point?" He turned his head slightly, eyes catching the dim light. It felt real. Her pulse skipped. When he dropped her off, Jasmine stood by the curb long after the Bentley disappeared, the night breeze wrapping around her like a secret. She exhaled slowly, whispering to herself, "Careful, Ferguson. You're supposed to be investigating him, not falling into his story." But deep down, she already knew. Her heart was no longer following the script. The newsroom's hum was quieter than usual that afternoon, but inside Jasmine Ferguson's head, everything was loud. The click of her keyboard, the steady thump of her pulse, the whisper of betrayal she couldn't silence. On her laptop screen, a series of numbers glowed like danger itself. Account transfers routed through BLC Holdings, money moving between shell companies disguised as consulting fees. The signature at the bottom of one scanned document read, "Desmond Frederick, CEO." Her breath caught. It couldn't be. She zoomed in, her pulse quickening. Every curve of ink, every sharp edge of the letters, it looked real. And if it was real, the man whose hand had brushed hers under chandeliers, who had whispered stories of his late mother beneath the Lagos night sky, was laundering money. Her throat tightened. "No," she whispered under her breath. "There must be another explanation." But the journalist in her, the voice that had carried her this far in a ruthless world, argued otherwise. Follow the evidence, not your heart. Jasmine leaned back in her chair, staring at the document as the Lagos sun sank behind glass towers outside. Her reflection in the screen looked like someone she no longer recognized, part reporter, part woman on the edge of heartbreak. Before she could gather her thoughts, her phone buzzed. Desmond Frederick. Her pulse jumped. She hesitated, then answered. Jasmine. His voice was calm, deliberate, smooth as dark wine. Are you free this evening? She swallowed hard. That depends on who's asking, the CEO or the man who likes to improvise fake relationships. A soft chuckle came through the line. Both, perhaps. I'd like to show you something. My estate outside Ikoyi. It's overdue. Her heart stumbled. Meeting at his estate? That wasn't business. That was personal. Dangerous even. But curiosity and something more stubborn pushed her forward. All right, she said, her voice steady. Send me the address. An hour later, Jasmine's cab rolled through an ornate wrought iron gate guarded by men in tailored uniforms. The estate beyond was sprawling, a blend of modern architecture and colonial charm. Cream walls framed by tall palm trees. A fountain glimmering in the center courtyard. Desmond stood waiting by the grand entrance, dressed simply in a white shirt and dark trousers, no tie, no boardroom mask. Yet even stripped of the armor of formality, he carried power in the way he stood. You live like a Bond villain, Jasmine said, stepping out. All you need is a secret helicopter pad. He smiled faintly. It's behind the tennis court. She blinked, then laughed despite herself. You're impossible. Come, he said, gesturing toward the front door. There's someone I want you to meet. Inside, the house was quiet but alive with warmth-framed photos, faint music drifting through the halls, and the scent of garden roses. A young woman appeared from the corridor, her hair a soft chestnut, her eyes bright with curiosity. This is my sister, Elise, Desmond said. Elise, this is Jasmine, my... He paused just a fraction too long before finishing. My girlfriend. Jasmine froze. The word landed heavier than it should have. Elise smiled warmly, shaking her hand. Finally, the mystery woman. He never brings anyone home. Jasmine forced a polite smile. He probably wanted to make sure I wasn't going to run a background check first. Elise laughed. Then you must be perfect for him. Dinner was a quiet, elegant affair, candlelight, soft jazz, and a table big enough to seat 20, though there were only 3 of them. Elise told stories about their childhood, the long afternoons near the marina, their mother's obsession with blue dresses, and Desmond's quiet ambition even as a boy. He built his first company at 18, Elise said proudly. Even then, he wanted control over everything, even the weather, if he could. Still does, Jasmine muttered playfully. Desmond shot her a look that was half warning, half amusement. After dessert, Elise excused herself, leaving them alone. The silence that followed was gentle, almost fragile. Desmond leaned back in his chair. You held your own tonight. Was it a test? Jasmine asked, raising a brow. He tilted his head, eyes steady. Everything in my world is a test. And did I pass? He smiled faintly. You exceeded expectations. Jasmine's heart thudded louder than it should have. The way he said it, quiet, sincere, unraveled her defenses in ways she couldn't control. But guilt gnawed at her chest. Sitting across from him, she couldn't stop seeing that signature, bold and damning, on the document in her laptop. She took a breath. Desmond, do you ever get tired of pretending? He looked at her for a long moment. All the time, he said softly, but sometimes pretending is safer than truth. The air between them tightened. Jasmine looked down at her hands, suddenly unsure what to do with them. I have something for you, Desmond said quietly, reaching into his jacket. He placed a small velvet box on the table and slid it toward her. She blinked. If this is another contract, I'm charging you for emotional labor. Open it. Inside lay a sleek silver pen classic, elegant, engraved with her name in neat cursive. Jasmine Ferguson. Her breath hitched. I noticed you always carry a cheap plastic one, he said lightly. I thought you deserved something more fitting. Jasmine ran her thumb over the engraving, her throat tightening. You didn't have to. I wanted to. Something inside her broke quietly, not pain, but confusion, warmth, colliding with guilt. She smiled faintly, trying to steady her voice. You're making this whole fake girlfriend thing dangerously convincing. Desmond leaned closer, his gaze steady, unreadable. Maybe it's not all fake. Her pulse fluttered wildly. Careful, Frederick. That almost sounded sincere. Maybe it was. They stared at each other for a long moment, the billionaire and the journalist, two people built on control, suddenly suspended in something that felt like neither truth nor lie. Finally, Jasmine broke eye contact, her voice barely above a whisper. Desmond, you don't even know who I really am. He tilted his head. Maybe I do. You're the woman who doesn't look away when things get difficult. The one who asks questions everyone else is afraid to ask. Her chest ached. If only you knew how close those questions were to your doorstep. When she left later that night, the air outside felt heavier, as if carrying the weight of both desire and betrayal. The pen rested in her purse, gleaming softly beneath the city lights, a symbol of something that shouldn't exist. As the driver pulled away, Jasmine stared out the window at Desmond's silhouette fading in the distance. He trusts you, she whispered to herself, her voice trembling. And you're about to destroy him. Her phone buzzed again, a message from her editor. Any progress on the BLC Holdings case? Deadline moved up. We publish next week. Jasmine's fingers hovered over the reply. Her vision blurred. She couldn't decide if what filled her chest was dread or heartbreak. When she finally typed back, her hands were shaking. Almost there. But as the car disappeared into the Lagos night, she wasn't sure anymore whether she meant the story or the end of whatever fragile thing she and Desmond had started. By Monday morning, the newsroom's air tasted like metal, sharp with urgency, hot with rumor. Phones rang in overlapping waves. Editors barked names across clustered desks, and the printers coughed out drafts that smelled of ink and adrenaline. In the middle of it, Jasmine Ferguson sat at her monitor, staring at a headline that wouldn't hold still. BLC Holdings, the hidden veins of a fortune. She deleted it, typed another. Deleted again. Her editor, Mr. Adeyemi, appeared at the edge of her vision, like a storm front in a suit. He set a folder on her desk with deliberate weight. We go live Friday, he said. You'll give me a draft by end of day. Friday? Her voice grazed the surface of calm and nearly slipped. We're still verifying the sign-off chain. The sign-off is verified enough, he said, tapping the folder. We have routing numbers, transfer schedules, and corroborating statements. They point to BLC as a laundering artery. We're not writing poetry, we're dropping facts. She held his stare. If we drop them wrong, they shatter the wrong person. He narrowed his eyes. Do you have a conflict I should know about? The question landed like a slap. No. Good, he said, not convinced. Then stop massaging sentences and bring me a story. Two rival desks are sniffing the same blood. If you stall, they'll publish first, and we'll look like we were protecting a billionaire. He leaned in, lowering his voice. We are not protectors. We are a newspaper. When he left, the folder sat like a verdict. Jasmine opened it with steady hands and a fractured heart. Pages, names, numbers. A lattice of money threaded through subsidiaries and shells. At the bottom of one scan, Desmond Frederick, a signature bold enough to burn. She rubbed her thumb over the ghost of ink and whispered, Please be a forgery. Her phone vibrated. A text from Desmond. Dinner? 8 p.m. My office. No flourish, no emojis. Just the quiet gravity he used when he wanted to see her, without witnesses. She typed back, I'll come, then paused, staring at the message like it was a door she might not return through. She added, We need to talk. Sent it. Watched the read receipt appear, then vanish. All afternoon, she bought time with the precision of a surgeon, asking for another pull of filings, requesting a forensic pass on the signature curves, pinging a source in compliance who owed her a favor. Every minute she gained felt like stealing oxygen underwater. At 7:52 p.m., she stepped out of the elevator onto the top floor of Frederick Holdings. Floor-to-ceiling glass held back the Lagos skyline, a mirror of lights and restless water. The receptionist had already gone. The corridor was hush and leather and the soft hum of climate control. Desmond's office door was open. He stood by the window, jacket off, shirt sleeves rolled, expression unreadable. The city reflected in the glass, cut across his profile like shards. "You came," he said, not turning. "I said I would." He faced her then, and her rehearsed words dissolved. There was no easy version of this. "Desmond, I need to tell you something, and I should have told you earlier." "You're investigating me," he said. Silence did what sirens do. It made everything else small. Her breath faltered. "Who told you?" "A board member who collects gossip like coins," he replied. "He heard it from a journalist who isn't as careful as you. He said your byline is attached to a BLC story, that it names my company, that it names me." Jasmine forced herself to stand straighter. "It names BLC. It raises questions about who authorized the transfers. I am still verifying," he finished, mouth lifting in a humorless line. "How generous." "I wasn't hiding," she said. The lie cracked as it left her. "I was waiting until I had enough to ask you to your face." He moved closer, slow and controlled. "Ask me what, Jasmine? Whether I am a criminal? Whether the man who walked you through his home? Who introduced you to his sister? Who gave you a pen because you deserve something that will not fail? Whether that man moves dirty money for sport?" "Don't do that," she said, voice thin. "Don't weaponize kindness. Then don't romanticize betrayal." The words pierced cleanly. She swallowed. "I didn't come to betray you. I came to make sure the story doesn't betray the truth." "That's a beautiful sentence," he said softly. "Did you practice it on the way up?" She stared at him. At the restraint, the fury throttled into poise, the ache he couldn't quite hide. "If I were only a reporter, I would have filed already. I'm here because I needed to hear you say it. Tell me those signatures aren't yours." For the first time, something like injury flickered. "You needed me to plead. I needed a reason not to burn you alive by mistake." They stood inches apart, both breathing like they'd run. He looked down at her, voice dropping to a rough whisper. "What am I to you, Jasmine? A headline? A door into rooms you couldn't enter alone? Or a man you—" He stopped, jaw tightening. "No, that would be convenient to believe." She shook her head. "You are the most complicated thing I have ever wanted." A muscle jumped in his cheek. "And the story is the purest thing you've ever worshipped." "It's not worship," she said. "It's duty. It's the way I know how to keep faith with people who get crushed by men who never bleed." "Look at me," he said, stepping closer, anger cooling into something colder. "I bleed." She did look, and what she saw terrified her, because he did. Because whatever he hid behind the suits and the steel, he had let her see it, and she had come with a torch. "Answer the question," she said, forcing courage to the surface. "Did you authorize those transfers? Would you believe me if I said no?" He didn't blink. She opened her mouth and realized the only honest answer would ruin them both. "I don't know what I believe." The quiet between them curdled. Something in his face closed like a door. He nodded once as if she'd confirmed a private verdict. "Then we're finished." She flinched. "Desmond." "We are finished," he repeated, each word laid like stone. "Whatever this was, it ends here. I don't share my table with people who hold knives under it." Tears surged, humiliating and hot. "I should have told you the first night the investigation touched your company. I was afraid of losing the only good thing I've had in years that didn't ask me to be anything but myself." "You haven't been yourself," he said gently, and somehow it was the cruelest thing of all. "You've been an editor's deadline with a heartbeat." He stepped back, reclaiming distance inch by inch. "Tell your newspaper what it wants. Tell the city what it wants. Tell yourself you did the right thing." His gaze slid briefly to the pen in her bag. "Keep the souvenir. Throw it away. It doesn't matter." "It matters to me," she whispered. He looked past her to the skyline, to a point she couldn't touch. "What matters to you will publish on Friday." The sentence landed like a gavel. She reached for him without moving, reaching with the only tool left: truth. "I didn't use you to climb. I didn't plan the terrace or the dance or the way my chest goes light when you laugh like you're surprised to hear yourself. I didn't plan any of it. He closed his eyes briefly, as if it hurt to listen. You planned enough. He walked to the door, opened it, and held it the way a gentleman would. She wanted to refuse the gesture, to stand stubbornly in the wreckage until the building gave way. But pride was a poor stretcher. She moved past him, the scent of cedar and winter air catching in her throat. At the threshold, she turned. If I find proof you're innocent, I'll tear my own story apart to print it. If you find proof, he said, not looking at her, you won't be doing it for me. You'll be rescuing yourself from the story you chose. The door clicked behind her with a softness that felt worse than a slam. She reached the elevator on legs that didn't belong to her. The mirrored walls threw her back at herself. A woman in a clean dress with a pen she couldn't bear to hold, a mouth that trembled, a spine that refused to break where people could see. On the street, Lagos roared alive. Horns, hawkers, electric heat rising from asphalt. Jasmine walked into it as if into rain, letting the noise take some of the blame. Her phone pulsed in her palm. ADMI, draft 9 a.m. tomorrow. No excuses. She typed, you'll have it. Deleted it. Typed, I need 48 hours. I can tighten verification on signatory authority. Sent. His reply came fast. 24. She stared at the number until it blurred. 24 hours to choose the kind of woman she would be. At home, she placed the velvet box on her kitchen counter, opened it. The pen glinted like a promise and a threat. She pressed it to paper, wrote his name once, then crossed it out until the page tore. She poured water, didn't drink it, paced, sat, stood again. Logic lined up like soldiers. Verify the chain, run the signature through an independent examiner, pull the board minutes, subpoena if she had to. Her heart had fewer steps. Find him, ask again, believe. Near midnight, the city quieted. She opened her laptop and began to write. Not the article, but a list. Truths I can stand on. BLC rotes exist. The pattern suggests laundering. Signatures match, probably. People I trust are not infallible. I am not either. I want him. Wanting does not make a fact false. Fear does not make a fact true. She set the pen down and pressed her palms to her eyes until stars burst in the dark. When she looked up, the clock read 12:47 a.m. Conscience or heart, she said to the empty room. Pick one. But she already knew the only choice that would let her walk into a newsroom and out of a mirror. Find the truth, wherever it cuts. Her phone buzzed once on the counter. A security cam pinged from a source. A still frame, a signature page moving across a copier under someone else's hands. Jasmine's pulse thumped hard. She grabbed her keys. If salvation existed, it would not come as mercy. It would come as evidence. Cold, unromantic, undeniable. And until she found it, love would have to stand in the hallway, shaking, waiting for a door that might never open again. Night crept through the newsroom windows in dull streaks of orange when the email arrived. Subject, internal audit, confidential. The sender's address was masked behind a foreign relay, but the attachments bore company headers Jasmine Ferguson knew by heart. She opened them with trembling fingers. The audit logs showed timestamp edits, digital fingerprints, everything pointing to one name, Richard Hale Desmond, Federick's vice president and long-trusted confidant. Richard had forged Desmond's signature, rerouted funds through BLC Holdings, then buried the trail under layers of false authorization. Jasmine exhaled, half laughter, half sob. He's innocent. For a single heartbeat, relief felt like oxygen after drowning. Then the second heartbeat came, the one that whispered what people like Richard did when cornered. She copied the files to a secure drive, slipped it into her bag, and left the building. The Lagos night was slick with rain, streetlights bleeding gold across wet asphalt. She didn't notice the dark sedan idling half a block behind her until its headlights flared and tires screeched. A hand clamped over her mouth before she could scream. The world spun, Rain became floor, then blackness. She woke to the smell of rust and oil, concrete walls, a single bulb, wrists bound to a chair. Her voice cracked. "Who's there?" A man stepped from the shadows. Sharp suit, eyes like slate. Richard Hale. "I warned Desmond about you," he said calmly. "The journalist with questions. The woman who made him forget his place." Jasmine's pulse thundered. "You forged his signature. You used him." Richard smiled. "You shouldn't have found that out." He crouched to her eye level. "Delete every copy, every file, and maybe you'll walk out of here." "Not happening." His smile thinned. "Pity." He raised his phone. "Dispose of her when the truck arrives." The door clanged shut behind him, leaving her with the echo of footsteps and the realization that she might not see another sunrise. She twisted at the ropes, skin burning, mind clawing for escape. "Desmond, please, not like this." Miles away? Desmond stood in his office before a wall of rain-lit glass, trying to forget her voice. Then his phone rang. A blocked number. A stranger's tone, urgent. "Mr. Frederick, you don't know me, but your vice president has done something terrible. He's taken the reporter. Warehouse off Marina Road." The line died. Desmond's heart slammed once. Logic said, "Call security, the police, protocol." Instinct said, "Run." He grabbed his keys, his gun license forgotten in a drawer, and drove like a storm through the city. Jasmine had managed to cut part of the rope on the chair's rough edge when the warehouse door burst open. Two men rushed in and froze at the sound behind them. A car engine roared, then cut. Boots hit puddles, the air filled with the smell of rain and adrenaline. Desmond stepped through the doorway, soaked to the bone, his gray eyes burning. "Touch her," he said, voice like gravel ground to dust, "and you'll answer to me." One man lunged. Desmond swung first, clean, fast, brutal. The other reached for a gun. Desmond slammed him against the wall. The weapon skidded across the floor. "Desmond!" Jasmine shouted, her wrists raw, fear splitting her voice. He cut through the last of the ropes and pulled her up. "You're safe," he said, but his tone trembled, a plea disguised as certainty. Richard appeared on the mezzanine above, pistol glinting under the single bulb. "Heroic," he sneered, "but you were never meant to win, Desmond. Not in business, not in love." The shot cracked. Desmond yanked Jasmine down. The bullet grazed her arm, tearing fabric and skin. Pain exploded. She gasped, dizzy. Police sirens wailed somewhere beyond the docks. Richard hesitated, too long. Desmond surged up the stairs, fury controlled by precision. 2 strikes. The gun clattered away. Officers poured in, and Richard Hale went down screaming. At the hospital, antiseptic and silence replaced the gunfire. Jasmine lay on a white bed, pale but alive, an IV line tracing mercy into her veins. Desmond sat beside her, his shirt still damp, a smear of her blood dark on the cuff. He hadn't spoken since they arrived. He just held her hand as if letting go might erase her pulse. When her eyes fluttered open, his composure cracked. "Don't move," he said softly. "You're all right." She smiled weakly. "You always say that when everything's on fire." He exhaled a broken laugh, pressing her hand to his lips. "You found the proof." "I had to," she whispered. "You didn't believe me." His voice roughened. "I didn't believe anyone could care enough to risk dying for me. I was wrong." Tears slipped from her lashes. "You once told me pretending was safer than truth." He nodded, eyes glistening. "Then you came along and made the truth worth bleeding for." She tried to sit. He steadied her. "Desmond," she said, voice barely a thread, "promise me we stop pretending. No more facades, no more masks." "I promise," he said. "You have my word and whatever's left of me." Her smile trembled. "That's everything I wanted." He leaned closer, forehead to hers, the sterile room shrinking around their whisper. "I'm sorry," he murmured, "for doubting you, for every cruel word I used to hide what I felt." And I'm sorry for keeping the investigation a secret, she breathed. I thought I could protect both of us. I nearly lost everything. He brushed his thumb along her bandaged arm. You nearly lost your life. But I found you, she said. For a moment, neither moved. Machines hummed. Rain tapped at the windows. The world outside could have ended, and they would not have noticed. Then Desmond said quietly, when you get out of here, I'm taking you home. To your estate? She teased faintly. No, he said, smiling for the first time in days. Somewhere that isn't built on fear, maybe near the water. My mother would have liked that. Blue, Jasmine whispered. Her color. Yours now, he said. She laughed through her tears. You're impossible. I'm redeemed, he corrected gently. He stayed all night. At dawn, when the first light bled across the blinds, Jasmine woke to find him still holding her hand, head bowed in sleep against the mattress. For the first time, she didn't feel like an outsider in his world. She traced her fingers along his knuckles until he stirred. Morning, she said softly. He looked up, weary and radiant all at once. Morning, trouble. Her chest filled with warmth, so deep it hurt. We're really done pretending, right? He reached for the pens she'd once carried everywhere, the one engraved with her name, and set it on the bedside table. No more contracts, no more illusions, just us. She nodded, tears glimmering again. Just us. He bent to kiss her forehead, lingering there, and whispered against her skin. You saved my life twice. First from the scandal, then from myself. Then we're even, she murmured, smiling through exhaustion. He shook his head. Not even close. Outside the window, Lagos awakened. Horns, sea breeze, and the first glint of sunlight after days of rain. Inside, two people who had once built walls out of fear began, quietly, to build something else. Truth. And this time it wasn't pretend. 6 months later, the Lagos skyline shimmered like a memory reborn. The scandal that once threatened to destroy Desmond Frederick had become yesterday's news, replaced by headlines praising his courage for exposing corruption within his own empire. Richard Hale had been sentenced to 12 years in prison. Justice, like sunrise, had arrived slowly but completely. Jasmine Ferguson watched the waves roll against the pier at Banana Island, the air filled with the smell of salt and hibiscus. She wore white today, a simple linen dress fluttering in the ocean breeze, as she arranged flowers on a long wooden table set for two. Behind her, footsteps crunched softly on gravel. Still working while everyone else is relaxing, Desmond said, slipping an arm around her waist. She smiled without turning. Old habits. Some people edit headlines, some rearrange flowers. He chuckled, pressing a kiss to her temple. And some of us are just trying to keep up with you. The sound of the sea wrapped around them like music. They had left the chaos of downtown behind, trading marble offices for mornings by the water. Desmond still ran his company, but differently now. Slower, cleaner, open. Jasmine freelanced for international magazines, writing about truth and ethics instead of scandal and exposure. When people asked what happened between them, she always said, "We stopped pretending." Desmond stepped beside her, watching the lagoon glint under the sun. You know, I still replay that night sometimes, he said quietly. The warehouse, the sirens, you on the floor, bleeding, and me thinking I was too late. She turned toward him, brushing her fingers along his jaw. You weren't too late. You came back for me when I'd already stopped hoping anyone would. He caught her hand, kissed her palm. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. She smiled. That's how redemption works. Someone has to see you before the world does again. For a while they stood in comfortable silence, the wind tugging gently at her hair. Then Desmond reached into his pocket and pulled out something small and familiar, the silver pen he'd given her months ago, now polished and shining. You kept it, she murmured. Of course, he said. It's our story in one line. You write, I learn. Her eyes softened. And what have you learned, Mr. Frederick? That control isn't strength, he replied. love is. Jasmine laughed softly, blinking away tears she didn't expect. You're starting to sound poetic. Should I be worried? Maybe, he teased. I'm planning to use that line in our vows. Her heart stilled. Our what? He reached into his jacket again, this time holding a simple velvet ring box. When he opened it, sunlight caught on a band of gold carved with tiny waves, the same shade of blue his mother once loved. Marry me, Jasmine Ferguson, he said quietly. Not for appearances, not for the cameras, not because it looks perfect on paper, but because it's real. Because you make truth feel like home. For a moment she couldn't breathe. The sea, the wind, the city, all of it blurred into a single heartbeat. Then she whispered, yes. Desmond smiled, slipping the ring onto her finger. That's the only headline I'll ever need. She laughed through her tears. Careful, I might quote you. Good, he said. Let the world read about what honesty looks like. They stood together at the water's edge, the sound of gulls and laughter mingling with the hum of the city in the distance. Later that evening, when the guests arrived, a small gathering of close friends, Elise among them, they toasted under strings of light, clinking glasses to new beginnings. Jasmine raised hers and said softly, to the moment we stopped pretending. Desmond looked at her with quiet affection, and to the woman who taught me how. As the sun dipped behind the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and blue, he pulled her close. The city lights blinked awake across the lagoon, but for once neither of them looked back toward them. There were no secrets left, no scripts to follow, just two hearts finally unmasked. And under that Lagos sky, their love didn't need pretending anymore.